Hey everyone, welcome to the video. If you're new to the channel, my name is Solomon Thomas and I've been running for about 7 years now. 4 of those years were spent in the Marine Corps where I was focused on getting my 3 mile time down. In the past 4 years, I've been running marathons and I've been able to get my marathon from a 4.5 hour time down to sub 3, right at 2:59. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my top 5 tips for anyone who's just starting out as a runner, or more specifically a marathon runner. So my first tip is to follow the 80-20 rule when it comes to separating your easy runs and your fast runs. So the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle or Pareto distribution, has many names. The idea is that 80% of your outcomes or outputs will come from 20% of your inputs. So in the corporate world, this would mean that 20% of your employees are really producing 80% of your work. And the idea for managers, or really anyone who's trying to apply this principle, is to focus on the minority of inputs or effort or people or activities that will give you the biggest bang for your buck. So if we apply this to marathon training, there's kind of two ways you can approach it. One way would be to focus on the 20% of, excuse me, one way to apply this would be make sure that for your weekly volume, so however many miles you're running per week, you have 20% of those miles are fast runs, and then 80% of those runs are easy runs. Easy can be defined in terms of pace, it could be defined in terms of time or heart rate, or even just general feel. So when you're running easy runs, you want to be able to have a conversation, breathe through your nose. There's also many formulas that you can look up online to track your heart rate if that's something that you want to use to try to be more objective. And then, of course, your fast runs would be or tempo, threshold, race pace, or faster than race pace, depending on your goal. So again, the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, you want 20% of those miles to be fast and 80% to be easy. So I mentioned there's kind of two ways to look at this. For me, when I was first running, my default was to run every single run as fast as I could, or at least to be drenched in sweat, super sore, and in pain going into the next workout. So I was not running any of my miles easy. So I needed to focus on making sure that those 80% of runs, those 80% of my weekly volume, those 80% of my miles were done easy. And then on the day or maybe 2 days per week where I had that 20% of my fast runs, those speed runs, I would just resort to my default way of running, or maybe even push it a little bit more. Now, there are some people who are going to be the opposite. There are some people who hate speed workouts and they hate fast runs, and they're perfectly fine with run walking as they're trying to build their aerobic fitness, and so their default is to run easy. Well, those people are going to have to focus on that 20% of runs. Either way, the tip, the first tip that I want to offer is just to focus on separating your runs into easy and fast runs, and then running the easy miles easy and running the fast miles fast. Now, my second tip is to build volume slowly. So I already mentioned volume. That's your the number of miles that you're running over a given time period. I guess you could measure it by week or by month or by year. I typically talk about weekly volume. When you're first starting out, let's say for the marathon, I'll take myself as an example. When I first started out, I was only able to run about 35 or 40 miles per week. And I really had no idea what I was doing. I first started watching Nick Bare, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I can do that. I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, and it was very hilly out there. It was also beautiful. There's so many beaches, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to go out and start running. And today I might run 10 miles. The next day I might run 13 or then 6. No real planning. But the volume where I noticed my body started to break down, or it stopped being fun, not necessarily in the sense of it stopped being easy, but I noticed that there was a dip in my performance, and it was a point of diminishing returns. It was about 35 to 40 miles per week. And as I first started trying to train for a marathon while I was in Okinawa, Japan, this was in 2020 or 2021, I believe. I told myself I was going to run 26.2 miles just around the island, just an out and back. And I said, well, I need to raise my volume to 50 miles. And so I went from running 35 miles one week to running 50 miles the next week. And my body was absolutely trashed. And listening to Nick Bare and some of the advice that he gave, and this is something that's helped me, is don't increase your weekly volume more than 10% of your current mileage per week, or you could do it per month. And so let's say I'm running 30 miles per week. I shouldn't increase my weekly volume more than 3 miles. So the next week I would go to 33. And then, if I'm feeling good, if my body seems like I can handle it, then I would bump it up to 36 or 37, however much. And you'll notice as your weekly volume increases, the number of miles you can increase per week also increases. And so you're able to get this compounding effect. But at some point, you'll reach a plateau or a threshold where, as you're trying to push the volume and as you're trying to get extra miles in for that week, you're going to have to give up something. Like maybe your performance for your speed workout is not that great, or maybe you have to start breaking up the miles that you do per day and do 10 miles in the morning and then 4 miles in the evening. And it all depends on how things are going for you. And that's something that's great about marathon training, is that you get to discover a lot about yourself and your situation and who you are and how you feel about these different stressors that you're putting on your life. And the different stressors will break you in some components, either mentally, physically, logistically, or however. And you'll have to learn where your weak points are and how you can compensate for them if this is something that you want to pursue. So a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, that second tip is build volume slowly. I like Nick Bare's principle of no more than 10% per week or per month. Now, the third tip, focus on active and passive recovery. So what do I mean by active recovery? This would be, in my mind, stretching, walking, foam rolling, using a Theragun or some sort of massage device, anything of that nature. And to me, this is, do I want to say the most important? I don't know if it's more important than passive recovery, but it's extremely important. For me, if I don't get at least 30 minutes of active stretching in per day, I know I feel it after, let's say, 1 or 2 days of failing to get those 30 minutes in. So as you are starting out and you're building your volume, your body is going to need recovery, and your attention is going to need to be diverted from, okay, I feel all right, I can just go out and do this run, to I know I have a run tomorrow morning, so maybe the night before I need to make sure that I stretch out, foam roll, do what I need to do to make sure my body is ready for the next day. Now, when we're talking about passive recovery, here I would really focus more on sleep. I would also put these, what are they called? The boots, the Normatec boots in that category. I don't have too much of an opinion on them, but, I have tried them and I have friends who have tried them, and, no one seems to say that they're game breaking or game changing, excuse me. But that's something that, if you're interested in it, you could try it out. But sleep, I would argue that sleep is the most important. Great resources for me have been listening to Andrew Huberman and Matt Walker. They're both scientists. They're public intellectuals, and they put out this information for free in terms of science-based methods and protocols for increasing your sleep. I also track my sleep on a Garmin watch. How accurate is it? Don't really care. For me, it's more the consistency factor. So I know that while the scores from 0 to 100, I don't really care if my score is 84, 83, 85, like, oh, what's the difference there? What I really care about is when there are nights where I have a sleep score of 40 compared to nights where there's a sleep score of 90, and how do I reduce the behaviors and activities that caused the lower sleep score while increasing those protocols that led to the better sleep score. So that's how I use that type of device. But I also have a sleep hygiene protocol, again, from these resources that I just listed, where I do my best to make it cold at night before I go to sleep. I try to be in bed at the same time every night. I try to wake up at the same day or at the same time every morning. I try to dim the lights and make everything dark and get off my phone as best I can. Now, this is probably one of the factors that I think are most pivotal, but I'm also still wrestling with. But I do think that the better that you can enhance your sleep, the better you'll feel and be able to perform when you're out doing these workouts, and even just when it comes to accomplishing the weekly volume that you've set for yourself. Sleep and passive recovery is going to play a huge role there. Now, the next tip is going to be nutrition. Here, my rules of thumb have just been to get at least 1,000 milligrams of electrolytes in me per day, as well as 20 grams of carbs before every single run. So that's my goal, and that's something that I've noticed can be a real inhibitor when it comes to accomplishing my speed workouts and getting the weekly volume in. When it comes to the weekly volume, it really comes down to the daily decisions that you make and then the micro decisions that you make within every single day, every single hour. So if I break down and I, get bad sleep, and I also forget to drink my electrolytes, and I also forget to restock on my carbs, my carb supplement that I use before each run, that all decreases the likelihood that I'll either A, finish the run, or B, perform as well as I could when it comes to tackling that workout. So nutrition for me has been another key factor that has been very helpful. And the last thing, that this is something that people that I admire and friends and other athletes that I've met over the years have told me about, that I wish I had started sooner, and it is to switch out your shoes. So currently I have 3 pairs of shoes. I have 2 daily trainers and then 1 pair of racing shoes or speed shoes. And so my 2 trainers, I alternate which pair I wear throughout the easy runs. And the way my weekly setup is right now when it comes to my runs, every day is easy except for Wednesday, which is a speed run. So Wednesday, I'm wearing my racing shoes, and then every other day when it comes to the easy runs, I'm switching between my dailies. And I was also told a while ago that you're not supposed to squat in the same shoes that you run in. And I think the principle is the same, is that you want to give your shoes you want to give your shoes time to recover, just like you want to give yourself time to recover. But you want to give your shoes time to decompress. And again, these are things that have been taught to me, and I haven't gone and done the deep dive research to talk about the optimal mode to switch out. But what I have noticed is that when I do run in shoes, the same pair, for a long time, there are similar injuries that start to manifest, or I don't want to say injuries, but pains and aches that start to manifest in the same spots. And so when I do switch those shoes out, the pain immediately goes away. For me, it's specifically in my Achilles. And so that's something that if I could start over, I would do my best to always have at least 2 pair of daily trainers that I can switch out, with the idea being that will reduce the stress that's being put on my body from wearing the same pairs of shoes that eventually get worn down a lot faster, and just prevent me from being able to stay in the game for a longer period of time. So those are my top 5 tips. I appreciate everyone for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.